Yo, welcome back to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today we're going to look at the top 8 decks from Portland Regionals. We now have the entire top 8 of Portland, all the deck lists revealed, and we're going to kind of analyze them, take a look at them, break each list down, and kind of talk about them, because this is going to be our meta heading in to Hartford, and Hartford is coming up in about almost a week away. We are very close to Hartford. It will be next weekend, so it's going to be a very interesting tournament, and it'll be interesting to see the results from Hartford and what happens, because we did, of course, get a very interesting top 8 in Portland. In fact, there was no Gardevoir in Portland at all. We did have 3 Lost Zone decks. Arctina won. Very interesting stuff. If y'all are excited for the video, make sure to leave a like. And if you're new to the second channel, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. But yeah, let's get into the top 8 from Portland Regionals. So we'll start things off here, of course, with the winning deck. Of course, the big one is Arctina 1. Yes, another Arceus deck won another major tournament in the Scarlet and Violet format. Now, Arceus Giratina is a deck that I honestly probably would have played to Portland. Had I gone to Portland, I most likely would have played Arctina. I think the deck is really good right now. It's one of the most, straightforward decks. It's also very good at what it does. The deck itself is basically just Judge Path the deck. And maybe it's a good Judge Path deck, because Judge Path is just really strong right now. And the only other deck that mimics Judge Path is Mew VMAX, but Mew, some people would argue, is not as good as Arctina, because Mew is easier to counter. So, of course, Arctina is all about using Giratina V-Star with the attack lost impact that does 280 damage. This deck is very, again, like I said, very straightforward. It plays the 1 Choice Belt, the 1 Cleansing Gloves. Giratina does hit high numbers. It does 280 damage. Of course, when you play a Belt, you're doing 310, which knocks out V-Stars, especially V-Stars with V-Guard Energy on, and the Cleansing Gloves lets Giratina do 310 damage to Gardevoir EX. And then with the Double Turbo Energy, you can use Double Turbo with Lost Impact to actually do the effect of Lost Impact, because you have to put 2 energy in Lost Zone with Lost Impact. The deck does play the 2-2 Bibarel and the 1 Squavette line. We know that the Squavette was kind of insane in Portland. If you saw the top 4 match against Grant Manley, you'll see that Landon got really lucky. He literally Squavetted into the perfect card twice in a row. It was just kind of insane. So, yeah, the deck is really straightforward. Some lists do play the Flying Pikachu. Flying Pikachu is really good right now. My issue with Arctina, I actually think that Arctina has a pretty bad Lost Zone matchup. Yes, we did see Landon take down the Lost Box deck in top 4 against Grant. To be fair, though, if Landon did not get the perfect Squavette for 1 card, he probably would have lost the game. So I don't know if Giratina's favored into Lost Box. I think the Flying Pikachu in Giratina might be something worth considering in the deck, because Flying Pikachu is really good against Lost Box, and it makes them very honest, especially when you're throwing Judge Path in their face every single turn. For the most part, though, the deck is very good. I think Arctina is a very strong deck right now, and it is cool to see that it won the entire tournament, because I do think the deck is really good. Again, I think the downside of the deck is that awkward Lost Box matchup. But other than that, I think it's just a very strong deck. It's very straightforward with what it does. You just go Judge Path, Trinity Nova, you got the Giratina. I'm not sure how popular Arctina is going to be going into Hartford. Yes, it did win Portland, but we'll have to see how much that translates over to Hartford, because we will probably see Arctina, people are going to build the deck and try it out. Unlike EUIC, where the Arcdura deck may or may not be as, easy to pick up going forward, because it was more of a meta call. This was not really a meta call deck. This was just a deck that's really good, that did well. So, this deck probably is still fine for Hartford Regionals. We'll have to see how fine it is. The interesting things about Landon's list, we do see the double Trekking Shoes. Shoes are really good in Tina right now. Some lists do play the Trekking Shoes. It basically allows you to see, 2 free cards a turn. It's also really good if you whiff the turn 1 energy attachment. The kind of gimmick behind Arceus is you want to make sure you're constantly getting a turn 1 energy on your Arceus V. This deck does play 14 energy in total, so a pretty high amount of energy. Then you have the double Shoes, which sometimes you can turn Trekking Shoes into an energy, because you get to see +2 cards. So Trekking Shoes is really good. It also can get you any card you want. A lot of the time, it can bail you out in finding a supporter, gets you maybe a V-Star if you don't have one. So I do like the double Shoes. Landon doesn't play any Charon's Care in his deck. I'm not sure I like that. I think Charon's Care is still worth playing in Arctina right now, because it does allow you to kind of reset Lost Box's damage output for a turn, and which can honestly make or break a scenario. So I think if I were to play Arctina, I would probably go down to 3 boss. I think a 3rd boss for an extra Charon's Care is probably the way to go. But hey, Landon won the entire tournament with the deck, so I can't knock it. But yeah, Arctina, pretty good deck. You could also experiment with Flying Pikachu in the deck if you want to improve your Lost Box matchup a little bit more. So I do think Flying Pikachu with Judge Path is really good against Lost Box. You make them have like all the outs at once. Then of course we got the second place deck here to take a look at here. We got Regan Retzloff with, of course, the Lugia Single Strike Urshifu deck. Now, it's really interesting to see Urshifu do so well. A lot of people were saying that Urshifu was not as good as the Duraludon build of Lugia. I think I even said that. The Duraludon seems to be a little bit stronger in Lugia, especially in the mirror, but the Urshifu did really well for Regan. He was able to get second place, and, I mean, he did use the Urshifu pretty convincingly in his stream games. He used it in the game against Li Bui to get into top 8. And yeah, Urshifu is obviously just here for both Gudra and Duraludon, where Urshifu, with a bunch of single strike energy, just one-shots the Duraludon and the Gudra. And then, of course, you do have access to the rest of the Lugia deck. The sacrifice you make with Urshifu is, of course, Regan doesn't play the Stone Journer in the deck. But because you have Urshifu, you probably don't need it. You have the T-Tar and the Evoltal for the Lost Box and for the Guardy matchups. Yeah, it's just a Lugia deck, right? Lugia is very strong if it sets up. He does play 2 Mesagoza over 3. He also plays 1 Serena and 1 Penny. The Penny's really smart. Penny can be very good, actually, to, like, take out a Lumineon off the board. Lets you prevent yourself from getting, like, stalled out of the game by, like, a Mawile, or even if your opponent just tries to boss stall you in general, even without Mawile. Penny can also just heal something like Tyranitar or Evoltal. It's honestly a really good card, and we did see Penny to get a lot of value for Regan in his matches he got. So I think the Penny might be a staple in Lugia going forward. It seems to be a very, very strong card in the deck. And yeah, I think Lugia is still pretty good going into Hartford. I think it might still be, I don't know if it's the play, but it definitely seems like Lugia is still like a top deck for Hartford. We'll get into that when we kind of get to the top 5 video. But yeah, Lugia still seems pretty good right now. And yeah, third place, we got Grant Manley with the Turbo Lost Box deck. Grant's whole squad was all on the Lost Box deck with the Kyogre. But yeah, it's Turbo Lost Box basically with the addition of Kyogre. Kyogre, of course, does give you better win conditions in a lot of scenarios against V-Star specifically. Very good against Arceus and Lugia. I think were the two ones that where the Kyogre really puts a lot of work in. Now, you see that the Turbo list doesn't play any Drapion or Snorlax, just kind of opting for the all-in package with the Kyogre. Having the Dragonite and Raikou is pretty good. Honestly, Grant maybe could have won the entire thing. I mean, with the 2 decks, he would have had to face the Lugia and the Arctina deck. But of course, Landon did get pretty lucky with those Squavettes at the right moment. But overall, the deck is pretty good. Kyogre is very strong. Kyogre does give you more win cons, but it also makes the deck harder to play. You have to get your deck down really low for Kyogre to work. The deck does play the one of Pokestop to help you get there, and also the Beach Court. Pokestop split being very smart. You do have to play the 3 Energy Recycler, but yeah, it's the Kyogre Lost Box deck. Very respectable run, and Kyogre is just really insane right now in the format. But that is not the only Turbo Lost Box deck. We got another one here with Andrew Gantner with the Turbo Lost Box. This one is a little bit more faster than the other one. This build does play the Lumineon and the Ultra Balls. No Kyogre, actually playing the Drapion V in the deck, and also the Snorlax, and that's pretty good. I mean, this deck is really strong. The interesting thing about Andrew's list is he does play the double Ultra Ball, which helps you find Lumineon, because Lumineon does not work with Nest Ball. You have to use Ultra Ball to use Lumineon's ability over Nest Ball. And I listen Lumineon does get a lot of value in the mirror match, because you can also attack with Lumineon in the mirror to put it back in the deck to knock out Comfeys and Crams and Sableye, which is really good. But yeah, Andy did get top 4 of the deck. Very Turbo Lost Box deck. Again, the Ultra Ball is a very interesting inclusion. The downside of Ultra Ball is you do have to get rid of important resources from your hand when you play it. Though I do assume that that's fine for Andrew, because you can get rid of, you know, stuff like Battle VIPs. You can get rid of Pokemon that you know you're not going to use in a matchup, like specifically maybe Raikou or Drapion do come to mind. But Ultra Ball can be a bit of a double-edged sword. Getting judged can be annoying too. Getting judged when you get Ultra Ball can be awkward, because sometimes you don't want to Ultra Ball away 2 cards. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword card, but it definitely makes sense when trying to go for the turn 1 Mirage Gate, because this build is very, very turbo. And I think very likely to get the turn 1 Mirage Gate when you do have access to the Lumineon Ultra Ball package. But again, that's not the only Lost Zone deck in top 8. We do have Alex Shemansky, who almost could have won another tournament back-to-back. And this is, of course, Alex's Kyogre Moltres Lost Box deck. Essentially the Nicholas Moffat deck, using the Moltres. I think the Moltres is really good right now in Lost Box. Moltres seems to be a really good card in the format, because it does work really well against Mew and Gardevoir. It's also just a really good late-game attacker. Kind of acts as like a pseudo Radiant Charizard a lot of the time. And, of course, with the Kyogre, you do get that extra win con with the Kyogre. It's all single-prize Pokemon. There is no Stones, there's no Drapion, no Lumineon, no Raikou, no Dragonite, just all in on the single-prizers. And yeah, it's very similar to Nicholas Moffat's list. I think a couple changes were made, but it's very close to what Nicholas played. You can see there's no Battle VIP pass in the deck. That was kind of the big thing with Nicholas Moffat's deck, was he didn't play any Battle VIP. He actually opted for Level Ball, Nest Ball, and Fog Crystal. The benefit of not playing Battle VIP is you have a bit of a slower pop-off turn 1, potentially, but you do get the ability to not have to deal with having VIP in the later half of the game. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes Battle VIPs is a card you don't want in your hand. If you're flower selecting or coercing VIPs away, it feels really good, but when you're drawn into them and you get judged or Roxanne in a Battle VIP, it feels really bad. That's the benefit of playing Fog Crystal, Level Ball, and Nest Ball. Again, your pop-off turn won't be as good. You have to draw the basics a little bit more raw or get them a little bit easier off of, you know, draw more Nest Balls and Fog Crystals. But overall, the deck is pretty solid, and I definitely think this deck is hard to play. If I were to play any Lost Box deck in top 8, I think this would be the last one I would play. Not because it's bad. I think this deck, in the right hands and played really well, this deck is insane. I think it's very hard to play. This deck, in my opinion, is a hard deck to play. The Moltres can be tricky to, you know, kind of properly use, and then, of course, the Kyogre is really hard to use, especially when combined with the Moltres. Because in, like, the Grant deck, you see that Kyogre is a bit more easier to pilot because you're using it more towards the end of the game and you're working towards it. Where in this deck, you kind of have a lot more going on, especially with the Moltres and the Kyogre package. So probably a harder deck to pilot, but very, very good deck in the right hands. And I think that we might see more Moltres in Lost Box going forward, because I do think Moltres is really good right now in Lost Zone decks. Very, very good. And then, of course, we got Mew getting top 8. And no surprise there that Mew got top 8. Mew does play very, very good Judge Path combos, which, again, is really all you need right now is Judge plus Path. Now, this list here is a bit different than Pablo's, but few similar cards. I mean, we do see the Cleansing Gloves. We see the Penny. The Fan of Wave stuck around, too. The Penny's very interesting. You can heal your Genesect, which is kind of smart, actually. You can play around potential Mawile plays, but you can also use it to reset damage. Sometimes Genesect, you know, sponges a hit because of a Spit or an Escape Rope, or sometimes you start with Genesect, which can be awkward. So being able to, like, move it with Penny is honestly really clever. Sometimes it can be good with Mew V, I guess, too. So really cool inclusion to play the Penny. And I'm sure the Penny did come in handy here. So, yeah, I like the idea of Penny and Mew. Again, Mew's just really good. Obviously, very good Judge Path deck like Arceus Giratina is, and no surprise we saw Mew get top 8. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Mew got top 8 throughout the rest of, like, this format. It's just a very strong deck. Then we got a Miraidon deck getting top 8 again. Now, this one is slightly different. It's actually very similar to a Miraidon Flappy video that I did a while back. So, yeah, it's Miraidon Flappy Box. So, it's a Flappy Box deck. No, Ampharos EX is not in here. Ampharos EX is not out yet on PTC, not out yet in tournaments. But yeah, the deck is Flappy Box, essentially using the Miraidon and the Raikou. You still have that, like, speed with Miraidon Raikou, donking potential, but you also have the Raichu with the Dynamic Spark attack doing 60 times for each energy you discard from it. So very good blow-up attack. Very helpful against Duraludon and Goodra, and just good at taking 1-hit KOs in general. And then, of course, you do play the 2-1 Magnezone split. Magnezone is very good against Gardevoir and very good against Lost Box, mainly because you use Magnezone V to pull up the Manaphy and knock it out. And if they don't get a Manaphy back down, you use Magnezone V-Star's V-Star power to take out 2 Pokemon with under 90 HP. You can also use it against Gardevoir, where if they don't get Manaphy either, or you knock out the Manaphy, you can use Magnezone to KO 2 Kirlias, which I do like the Flappy Box. I kind of gave up on the Flappy Box deck. I tried it for a bit, and I found that it was good, but when I was playing it IRL, the deck was kind of bricky, and I wasn't liking it as much, but I like this list too. Very consistent build. We got 4 Serena, 2 Research, 3 Arven, so there's a lot more draw in the deck, and I do like the deck. I think Flappy Box honestly could be a really good deck right now in the format. And we see that I got top 8. I am very happy to see Flappy Box get top 8, because I was sold on this deck at the start of the format. Kind of died off a little bit in my kind of testing, and I didn't like it as much afterwards, but I'm happy to see that it got top 8, and somebody that kind of improved upon the idea of Flappy Box. I really do like Flappy Box a lot. I like the idea of Force Serena, just very aggro draw in the deck, because, like, that's the problem with the format right now, is the draw supporters kind of suck. The only good one is Research, and, like, Serena's, like, quasi-good. You do have the Judge, which is decent too. But for the most part, the supporters in this format kind of suck. So it is cool to see that Serena, you know, did pay off as, like, the best draw. And it also acts as a Gust card in some scenarios. And then finally, I think the big surprise in top 8 was the Arceus Duraludon Umbreon deck. Now, I'm pretty sure this was also piloted by Makani Tran, Nathan Stratford here playing this deck. I really like this deck. This is actually a low-key, really cool idea, and I actually really like the idea of this going forward in the format. So, it is Arcdura. Arcdura is still good. Yes, it doesn't play the Vulpix, because Vulpix is not as good as it used to be anymore because, you know, Gardevoir kind of techs for Vulpix now. Vulpix kind of had its moment with EUIC. I don't think Vulpix is as good as it used to be, but I do like the idea of Umbreon. Now, Umbreon is a very quasi-multi-purpose card in this deck. The idea behind Umbreon is that you use its ability Gust. When you evolve it, you can Gust something up from the bench, which is really strong. And you're a Dark-type Pokemon, which means you have a strong Dark attacker versus Gardevoir and Mew. Now, the big kind of strategy of this deck is how it beats something like Lugia. So, we'll talk about how this deck beats Lugia. So, against Lugia, they're going to put a Duraludon V or an Urshifu V in play to make sure they go through your Duraludon. But what you basically get to do is you get to Arceus, build up your Dura, or you can go Choice Belt Hawlucha, and then you Umbreon the V up, and then you knock it out, and then you Lost City it, and then they can't Thorn it into play. And once you remove their main attacker against Dura, you just kind of win the game. And the Umbreon does have the aggressive Gust, which is good. You get to play Judge plus Umbreon in one turn, which is really good. There's a lot of really interesting supporters in the deck, though. The main one is the Adventurous Discovery. It does let you get 3 V Pokemon out of your deck. The idea behind Adventurous Discovery is it allows you to get all your Vs basically at once, which is a lot stronger than having to rely on finding Nest Balls or having to Starbirth for your V Pokemon. Being able to just grab them with Adventurous Discovery is really good. It also gets you an extra Arceus V-Star out, basically, which is good. You know, sometimes when playing the Arceus V-Star deck, you have to rely heavily on Ultra Ball, but in this build, we do see that it plays the 3-up Discovery, which can also get you your V Pokemon, which is really smart. And then, of course, the 2-2 Dura, the 2-2 Umbreon, pretty straightforward V count. I really like this deck a lot. I think it's honestly really strong in the format, and maybe it could be a good play for Hartford going forward. We do see the Volo and the Karen in the deck. Karen is really good. As you can see, Umbreon and Duraludon are both single-strike Pokemon, but Karen does do the best with Dura. With a Belt, Dura can do 250. With a Karen's Conviction, out of nowhere, Karen in the late game can take a one-hit KO out of nowhere. Karen does allow you to do 20 more damage with your single-strike Pokemon for each prize your opponent's taken. So if your opponent's taken like 4 prizes on you, Karen's Conviction lets you do plus 80 damage, which is insane. Then the Volo removes a V Pokemon from play. It's basically just like Charon's Care, but instead of healing your Arceus, you're discarding it from play. But you can Volo something else from play, like Lumineon, or a heavily damaged V like an Umbreon, which is probably really good in the Lost Box matchup. The Alakazam and Hawlucha are also really smart. So what Hawlucha lets you do is Hawlucha plus Belt lets you KO opposing Arceus Vs. Arceus V's got 220 HP. Arceus V-Star with a Belt can do 210, and then with the Hawlucha Ping, you can do 220, which you can knock out opposing Arceus Vs, which is pretty good, especially going forward into Hartford if people decide to, you know, play the Arctina deck. The Hawlucha also lets you fix math against Lost Box. If they're attacking you with the Dragonite V, you have to hit anything on the bench for 20, and then you can use Alakazam to move that damage around and take extra prizes. So you can take extra prizes with the Alakazam Hawlucha combo against Lost Box if they attack you with Dragonite. Now, a lot of the time when you're playing this, you know, Duraludon deck, they are going to use Dragonite as it is their strongest attacker to use against you. And when you're able to use Hawlucha Alakazam against Dragonite, it's very, very strong. So that's kind of the idea behind the deck here. Very smart idea. We could see this going forward in Hartford. I would love to see this deck going forward because I think it's a really cool idea. And I think has a lot of potential. The Umbreon VMAX seems really good right now. Of course, Arceus with a Dark Pokemon is pretty strong, right? And playing Umbreon also means you don't have to play Drapion. I don't know. I think the only changes to make to this list I would maybe think of would maybe to play more Draw. The deck only plays 2 Research, 2 Colress, 2 Judge as your Draw supporters. So you only have 6 Draw cards in the deck in total. So I would maybe consider playing a 3rd Research or something. I think a 3rd Research might be warranted in this deck. Because you do see the 2 Boss, because you have the Umbreon, you don't need to play like 3 Boss. You can play, you know, 2 Boss because you already have the Umbreon in the deck. But I definitely wouldn't mind maybe trying to squeeze in another Draw supporter in the deck, like a 3rd Research, just to help you a little bit more against Judge specifically. But overall, I think this deck is really strong, has a lot of really cool win cons, and I think is a very unique deck going forward. And I would maybe consider for Hartford myself, because I think this deck is honestly really unique. The idea of Hawlucha and Arceus is really smart, and then the Alakazam is also really, really clever too, as you're able to abuse the Dragonite V. And also, Alakazam can come up in random scenarios where you're two-shotting stuff with Arceus or Dura. You can conserve that damage on something else, which can help you one-hit KO it down the road. Like, for example, you can do 220 damage with Duraludon, and then the next turn you take 20 off onto an Arceus or something, you put 20 on it, and then like Dura with a Belt does, you know, 270, and then it's got 10 HP left, and I don't know, there's just a lot of manipulation you can do with Alakazam. I think it's really smart to play the Alakazam and the Hawlucha combo in the deck, and it's going to be a staple in Arceus going forward, mainly the Hawlucha specifically, because of how good it is in the Arceus mirror match to KO their opposing Arceus Vs for 220 damage with your Arceus V star. So yeah, that's it for the top 8 for Portland. Really unique, decks in the top 8. Again, a couple Lost Box decks. We do see that really cool Arctina deck. We'll have to see where the format goes going into Hartford. I'm going to do some Hartford content, obviously, going into next week, preparing for Hartford. I will be attending Hartford, so hopefully I will see some of y'all there. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on another video. Bye-bye.